Inshallah.
You could start.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وميثاقه الذي واثقكم به إذ قلتم سمعنا وأطعنا واتقوا الله إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. والله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم. والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ هم قوم أن يبسطوا إليكم أيديهم فكف أيديهم عنكم واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. ولقد أخذ الله ميثاق بني إسرائيل وبعثنا منهم 12 نقيبا وقال الله إني معكم لئن أقمتم الصلاة وآتيتم الزكاة وآمنتم برسلي وعزرتموهم وأقرضتم الله قرضا حسنا لأكفرن عنكم سيئاتكم ولأدخلنكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار فمن كفر بعد ذلك منكم فقد ضل سواء السبيل. فبما نقضهم ميثاقهم لعناهم وجعلنا قلوبهم قاسية يحرفون الكلم عن مواضعه ونسوا حظا مما ذكروا به ولا تزال تطلع على خائنة منهم إلا قليلا منهم فاعف عنهم واصفح إن الله يحب المحسنين. ومن الذين قالوا إنا نصارى أخذنا ميثاقهم فنسوا حظا مما ذكروا به فأغرينا بينهم العداوة والبغضاء البيضاء إلى يوم القيامة وسوف ينبئهم الله بما كانوا يصنعون يا أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب ويعفو عن كثير قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه سبل السلام ويخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور بإذنه ويهديهم إلى صراط مستقيم لقد كفر الذين قالوا إن الله هو المسيح ابن مريم قل فمن يملك من الله شيئا إن أراد أن يهلك المسيح ابن مريم وأمه ومن في الأرض جميعا ولله ملك السماوات والأرض وما بينهما يخلق ما يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير وقالت اليهود والنصارى نحن أبناء الله وأحباؤه قل فلم يعذبكم بذنوبكم بل أنتم بشر ممن خلق يغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء ولله ملك السماوات والأرض وما بينهما وإليه المصير يا أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم على فترة من الرسل أن تقولوا ما جاءنا من بشير ولا نذير فقد جاءكم بشير ونذير والله على كل شيء قدير وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جعل فيكم أنبياء وجعلكم ملوكا وآتاكم ما لم يؤت أحدا من العالمين يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين قالوا يا موسى إن فيها قوما جبارين وإنا لن ندخلها حتى يخرجوا منها فإن يخرجوا منها فإنا داخلون قال رجلان من الذين يخافون أنعم الله عليهم ادخلوا عليهم الباب فإذا دخلتموه فإنكم غالبون وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين قالوا يا موسى إنا لن ندخلها أبدا ما داموا فيها فاذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا هاهنا قاعدون قال رب إني لا أملك إلا نفسي وأخي فافرق بيننا وبين القوم الفاسقين قال فإنها محرمة عليهم 40 سنة يتيهون في الأرض فلا تأس على القوم الفاسقين واتل عليهم نبأ ابني آدم بالحق إذ قربا قربانا فتقبل من أحدهما ولم يتقبل من الآخر قال لأقتلنك قال إنما يتقبل الله من المتقين لئن بسطت إلي يدك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين إني أريد أن تبوء بإثمي وإثمك فتكون من أصحاب النار وذلك جزاء الظالمين فطوعت له نفسه قتل أخيه فقتله فأصبح من الخاسرين فبعث الله غرابا يبحث في الأرض ليريه كيف يواري سوءة أخيه قال يا ويلتى أعجزت أن أكون مثل هذا الغراب فأواري سوءة أخي فأصبح من النادمين من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا ولقد جاءتهم رسلنا بالبينات ثم إن كثيرا منهم بعد ذلك في الأرض لمسرفون إنما جزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله ويسعون في الأرض فسادا أن يقتلوا أو يصلبوا أو تقطع أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف أو ينفوا من الأرض ذلك لهم خزي في الدنيا ولهم في الآخرة عذاب عظيم إلا الذين تابوا من قبل أن تقدروا عليهم فاعلموا أن الله غفور رحيم صدق الله العظيم. Now, inshallah, Sheikh Saim Asif will join us for Tafsir al-Quran. So please stand by.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الشيطان لكم عدو فاتخذوه عدوا إنما يدعو حزبه ليكونوا من أصحاب السعير صدق الله العظيم. Dear brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be remembering him once again. You know that these gatherings, even though it's not a physical gathering, but these gatherings are surrounded by angels, as mentioned in the hadith. And there are certain angels which are roaming around the earth, specifically looking for the gatherings in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being remembered. And these angels, they see these such gatherings as we see the stars in the sky. So imagine how beautiful and how amazing these gatherings are. We don't realize how blessed we are to be sitting in such gatherings, whether it be physical or virtual. But it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's allowing us to sit in such a gathering. Going forward, yesterday we were speaking about Iblis, Shaitan, and how he became Shaitan, and what he promised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what he swore to do. He swore to misguide every single one of them, meaning all the believers except for his chosen slaves. So we spoke about why the story of Iblis and Adam alayhi salam was mentioned so many times in the Quran. We spoke about what are the reasons why Allah repeats things in the Quran. It's not just for no reason, rather there's a reason for each time. Each time the story is mentioned has its own unique points that is not mentioned previously. And even in the context, we can learn other things that we didn't learn previously. And I mentioned that there is entire genre of books dedicated just to this topic, Mutashabihul Quran, explaining how verses which are extremely similar but they have slight differences why those slight differences are there, and how those slight differences make a difference in the meaning, and how those slight differences therefore are not insignificant. Rather, every single word that Allah chooses in each place specifically is perfect, and it's for a specific reason. And that's actually another sign that the ulama mentioned. It's part of the miracle, the linguistic miracle of the Quran, that in so many places very similar ayat are mentioned, but these slight differences make that subtle change in the meaning that gives such a much deeper understanding of that subject, etc. So that's one of the hikmahs of repetition. Another hikmah of repetition is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned in one of the ayat, that Allah said that we did not send any messenger before you, nor a prophet, but except that he faced a situation that when he recited the revelation, recited the Quran, or whatever book he was given, Shaitan cast doubts in the hearts of his opponents about what he recited. So Allah nullifies what the Shaitan casts, and it's not necessarily only in the opponents that the Shaitan casts doubts in, but also it could be the believers as well, because we know that um, even a believer can have thoughts about doubt, but what we have to do is first and foremost seek refuge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from shaitan, and then we have to, if it's persisting, it's not just a passing thought, then we have to get it addressed by the scholars, those knowledgeable. And we should know that there are answers to all these things. It's just that we have to go to the right people to get these answers. So anyway, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so shaitan, what he does is he casts doubts about what he recited. So Allah nullifies what shaitan casts, and then Allah makes his verses firm. And one of the mufassirin mentioned, what does it mean by Allah nullifies what shaitan casts? How does Allah nullify these whispers of shaitan? By repetition. Because when Allah repeats over and over again, for example, Allahu bi kulli shay'in alim, Allah is knowledgeable of everything, then that really builds it in one's heart, and it gets rid of the whispers of shaitan. And then in other and we know in Surah Rahman, it might come to somebody's mind, why is the verse فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and which of your Lord's favors will you both jinn and men deny? Right? Why is that repeated over and over and over again? Well, this is one of the reasons to build that statement, just to imprint it into the heart, and to build yaqeen and certainty in that statement. And we mentioned that this is a tool that the advertisement companies use as well, is repetition. They make you watch companies about such and such products so many times that you start believing that this is actually a beneficial product for me, I should buy it. And so we end up buying it sometimes, even though we don't have any use for it. That's a tool that these advertisement companies employ as well. So, that's another thing that we mentioned yesterday. We mentioned certain things that Shaitan tries to make us do. He commands us to do what evil and indecent, and to say things about God that you don't really know. Shaitan has taken hold of them, causing them to forget the remembrance of Allah. Shaitan casts doubts in the hearts of people. Shaitan threatens with poverty and orders to do immorality. Then we read, sorry, I don't believe we read this excerpt. So we will read this excerpt from the book Talbis Iblis. I mentioned that this is a book written specifically for the devil's deception, but by a scholar of the past. But I mentioned that I wouldn't really recommend a person who doesn't have a background in the Islamic sciences to read it, because some things might be confusing, and it goes very detailed with some matters of beliefs. And I don't believe the intended audience was the general public. It was the intended audience was scholars. So, but I was just going to read some excerpts from it, with the comment that there's a great need for some book like this to come out, highlighting the devil's deception in today's era, and which things shaitan is using, which tools shaitan is using in order to misguide us in today's era, because we know that the tools of shaitan have only multiplied since the advent of technology, and there's no doubt about that. And people are falling into even more sin and evil than they are before. Yes, there are benefits of technology, but there are also many harms, and shaitan uses these tools to misguide us. So we have to be very careful and be on guard. Anyways, going back to this, so I'm going to read an excerpt from this book. So this is from the introduction. The translation is a little bit archaic, so I'll just make some changes here and there. But yeah, so this is how it goes. Know that messengers the prophets, والسلام, they brought sufficient clarifications, confronted disease with healing medicine, and agreed on a consistent doctrine. The devil Iblis came forth, mixing the clarity with doubt and medicine with poison, and the clear path with areas of falsehood and doubt. So we see that Shaitan is trying over and over again. Everything that the messengers came and did, he tries to completely undo that work, as we mentioned in the ayah previously. He continued to meddle with people's minds until he disintegrated with them with ignorance, leading them towards many foolish paths and hideous innovations. So they worshipped idols in the sacred house, and they made forbidden to them the bahira, sa'ibah, wasila, and ham. These are certain things that the people of the past, the people of Mecca, etc., they had made prohibited on themselves, even though Allah had not prohibited it for them. So that's actually from Shaitan, making things haram which Allah has not made haram for you. Then they adopted burying their daughters alive and deprived them from their share of inheritance. In addition, they innovated many forms of falsehood to which Iblis had convinced them. Then Allah, the Almighty and Majestic, sent Muhammad Rasulullah to remove all things that are appalling, all evil things, and to decree all things which are beneficial, meaning to establish beneficial things. His companions, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, walked with him, meaning they were steadfast with him, and after his death they walked through the illumination of his light, meaning the light of nubuwwah, light of prophethood, was always with them wherever they went. And so they were, what was the result of that? Because of this light, they were saved and free from their enemy, which is Iblis and his deception. However, when the light, and that's why, we know the hadith that Nabi Sallallahu told, لو رآك الشيطان سالكا فجا لسلك فجا غير فجك, or كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, that if Shaitan saw you taking a path, he would immediately go and take a different path. Like that was the extent of how they were protected from Shaitan, because of their knowledge and because of the nur and the iman that they got from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that it protected them from the deception of Shaitan, to the extent that Shaitan himself, imagine, after centuries and centuries and centuries and millenniums of working to misguide people, he is literally afraid of a person who's not a prophet, rather a companion of a prophet, but his level is so high. That shows the virtue of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They were the best companions that any prophet had ever been given. And we had gone into detail about the companions of Musa ﷺ, the Bani Israel. Obviously, all of them weren't like the things that I mentioned, but there was a large portion of them who had committed all of those crimes. And through that, you see the value and the virtue of the Sahaba, and how amazing they were. Going back to that, this was the situation of the Sahaba. They walked through the illumination of his light, the Prophet ﷺ's light, free from their enemy and his deception. However, when the light of their messenger's presence vanished, meaning after the Sahaba passed away slowly, the haze of darkness arrived, and desires turned to generate innovations and to make narrow a path that had always been wide. So the majority disputed over matters of religion and became different sects, and Shaitan Iblis became active. He deceived and camouflaged, and he gathered and divided. And we know the whole ploy of divide and conquer. So that's one of Shaitan's biggest tools, divide and conquer. He was only able to do so while creeping during a night of ignorance. This is a very important sentence. He was only able to do so while creeping during the night of ignorance. Had the dawn of knowledge shone on him, he would have been exposed. So I decided to warn from his plots and to point to his traps, for identifying evil is a form of warning from it. It was reported in both Sahihs on the authority of Hudayfa ibn Yaman radiallahu anh, that he said, people used to ask Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam about goodness, while I used to ask him about evil, out of fear that it might harm me. This is a very, very important hadith. Hudayfa ibn Yaman radiallahu anh. That's why actually he is known as Imam al-Fitan. Hudayfa ibn Yaman radiallahu anh, he is known as the Imam of you could say the signs of the Day of Judgment and all of those fitan and trials and tribulations that will come. So many of the ahadith which Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has prophesied, things that will come in the future, and the hardships that will come upon this ummah, and the trials that will come upon this ummah in the future. They're narrated by Hudayfa ibn Yaman radiallahu anh. You see the ahadith, you'll see the narrator will be Hudayfa ibn Yaman radiallahu anh. And what is the reason for this? The people always ask him about goodness. For example, what are the best actions I can do? What is the reward for this? What is the reward for that? Etc. So people used to always ask the Messenger of Allah about goodness. But what did he used to ask? He said, I used to ask him about evil, مَخَافَةَ أَن يُدْرِكَنِي, out of fear that it might harm me, that it might reach me and make me be a means of misguidance for me, right? So this is a very important point. Actually, there's actually a poem that says, عرفت الشر لا للشر بل لتوقيه, that I learned about evil. I learned about evil not for evil intents and purposes, but rather in order to abstain from it. Because if you don't know evil, if you don't know what is wrong, then how can you stay away from it? That is one thing that we really have to get into our minds. That today there is so much confusion. We are all in so much confusion because of the society that we were raised in. We went to schools here. We are slowly but subtly indoctrinated with ideas that are actually contrary to Islam, but we never realized it. And now what is that what that's causing us, and it never really came up when we were younger because there was no need, but now as we get older we start hearing things about the deen, and we start thinking that oh, that doesn't make sense to me, that seems wrong to me, this and that. The reason being that we have those preconceived notions that society had implanted in our hearts, in our souls, and the deen is the complete antithesis, the opposite of that. And so we start blaming the deen and thinking it to be thinking it to be wrong, na'udhu billah. And this is something that many people are falling into. So what we need to do, especially those who are exposed more directly to philosophy, more directly to specifically philosophy, specifically the roots of modernism. In reality, the today modernism, which is, or you could say postmodernism, which is the underlying philosophy of society today, is built upon following your desires and following what you want to do. And we went over this in a previous um, session, how now the focus is completely on the self. It mentioned that obey your thirst, for example, just do it, have it your way. So the focus is completely on the self to such an extent that now people have gone to the extent of completely going against the norms which were established from the beginning of time, which is which is that homosexuality and other things like that are things which are not the normal way to go about things, but now it's becoming something which is completely normal, and not completely moral as well. As long as it's something that you desire, it's something that's moral. And same thing with changing your gender, for example. This was something which was really unprecedented, to change your gender for no reason whatsoever, just because you feel like you might be more like a boy. For example, if you were born as a girl, or you feel like you might be more a girl than a boy when you were born as a boy. And so it's all completely based on your own desires. And so what's resulting with that is that we either, may Allah protect us, but people are going against either they're completely rejecting Islam, as we mentioned in the ayat regarding apostasy, about leaving the fold of Islam. We mentioned how it's becoming more and more common for people to leave the faith, and this is one of the main reasons, because there are so many preconceived notions being raised in the society we've been raised in, and being educated in the system we've been educated in, and not learning our Islamic morals, Islamic obligations, Islamic beliefs. Because of that reason, it leads to a lot of confusion, and we think that Islam is going against common ethics, common morals, when in reality, we haven't really defined what is morality, and we haven't defined what is truth and things like that. So that is why we are falling into such confusion. So either a person, he rejects the deen completely, and he says that this deen cannot be a true deen because it goes against what society says about this, even though society is ever changing. Um, or if he doesn't do that, um, then he starts changing the deen in order to follow their whims. So now you see people, you could say they have correct intentions because they don't want to leave the deen of Islam. Maybe the core tenets of Islam, like Tawheed, believing in Allah and the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu they have belief in it, but then there's so many other subsidiary things which don't make sense to them because of this reason, that they haven't truly learned their deen and learn what their deen has to say about it, and learn what is morality, what is truth, etc. So that is why they're now trying to fit the deen to our modern context and changing so many different rulings that were well established since centuries and centuries. So this is a huge trick of shaitan. So that is why it is actually important for us to learn about evil, about the evil of our society, and about those beliefs of our society which are against the deen, what the deen teaches, and so that we can, and you can say the underlying philosophies of our society, so that we can be aware and we can um, be, this is one of the big tools that shaitan is using to misguide us. So if we can be aware and to abstain from it, right? And this is what Hudayfa used to do. Whenever any evil that would come, he would ask Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about other evils that would come in the future, just so that he can be protected from them. And also, subhanAllah, you look at his fikr, his concern, that not only was he a means of protection for his own self from evil, but he was also a means of protection of the entire ummah, because he's narrating all these ahadith. So now whoever reads these ahadith, inshallah, they will be protected if they truly take these hadiths and internalize them. They will be protected from these evils as well. So this is the importance of having concern about your deen, and being afraid of falling into fitna and falling into evil. So this is an extremely important point that Hudayfa mentioned. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said, by Allah, I don't believe that the devil would like for anyone on the earth to die more than me. We know that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu was one of the Sahaba who lived many years after the death of Nabi Sallallahu. That's because he was only about 10 years old. There's a difference of opinion, but he was only about 10 years old when the Prophet Sallallahu passed away. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he lived another, I believe, 50 or 60 years after that. I think about 57 years or so after the death of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so he did a lot of amazing work spreading the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You look at the field of tafsir, it is largely built upon his opinions. And even in hadith, you see that Ibn Abbas was one of the most prolific narrators of hadith. And he had so many students that he taught, and those students had students and so on. So Ibn Abbas was one of the most, one of the ulama who really spread the deen, and he really was a means of preserving this deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him abundantly. So he said, by Allah, I don't believe that the devil would like for anyone on the earth to die more than me. And this was evidently after the demise of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, after many years, when he had become an Imam and somebody who everybody would come to. He was asked why. He replied, by Allah, he innovates something in the east or west, then a man carries me to him, meaning brings this thing to my attention, so I destroy it with the sunnah, so the innovations return back on him, meaning return back on his heels. So this is a small excerpt from the book. There's many other gems from the book. We don't have time to go into it. I wanted to go into some deceptions of Iblis, right? And this one is, there's a couple of these that are mentioned in the book, and some of these I just thought we can share, that are things that we can that are relevant to us, that are more relevant to our modern society than it was to previous societies. So some deceptions of Iblis. The first is thinking about the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great that we cannot understand his nature. So we are prohibited from thinking about the nature of Allah himself. Rather, we are encouraged and commanded to ponder about the greatness of Allah, and to think about his creation, through his creation, how amazing his creation is. That's why you look in the ayat. No, it doesn't ever say that think about Allah's that and how, the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, it talks about how we should ponder about the signs that Allah has placed in the universe. So that's one of the tricks of shaitan. He tries to make us really focus on the nature of Allah. And then, so yeah, then the another point that we mentioned is delving into matters we are not qualified to delve into. And I'll read the next one is related. Criticizing ulama for things we can't fully comprehend ourselves. And that's part of the second thing. And this has become actually not just for ulama, but unfortunately it's becoming general to all fields now. Before you could probably say that, you completely trust in a doctor's judgment. So why don't you trust the ulama? But unfortunately, even that's not the case anymore. Now, even doctors there's no respect for authority anymore. There's no respect for that a person has more knowledge in a subject than you. Why? Because of Google, right? This is obviously not just Google. I'm not specifying the search engine, but just the idea, the concept that we think that if we search something up, then automatically we have knowledge of it. We're confusing information with knowledge when there's a big difference between the two. So now a person goes on WebMD or just Googles his symptoms and he says that, okay, I have this sickness. Goes to a doctor, he tells him this, and the doctor says, no, you don't have that sickness. You have this other sickness. But you say that, oh no, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I clearly saw on the internet that, I have this sickness, such and such sickness. Or as we see all the different theories that are going on around about coronavirus, etc. So we are we have become an expert in everything. We think every single person thinks he's an expert in everything. But the thing is, in other fields, it's not as harmful. If a person feels that he's become an expert in medicine, the worst that can happen is he will harm himself and he'll pass away. But that is not as harmful as harming your deen, because we know the value of our deen is much more than anything else on the face of the earth. So now what's happening so commonly is that we hear some random person on the internet. We don't know what his credentials are. We don't know whether he said or not. You don't know what the context of the ayah or hadith he is quoting. But he says, look at this hadith. It's clearly in Sahih Bukhari. It's clearly in Sahih Muslim. This ayah is clearly in the Quran, this surah, this number, ayah number. It says this. And then we say that, oh, okay, that makes sense. What my local scholar, XYZ, Sheikh so-and-so says is this. But that doesn't make any sense. Or for example, like we have people criticizing the imams of the great imams of fiqh, the four ai for things that they literally don't know anything about. The four ai literally memorized thousands and thousands of ahadith and read thousands of more ahadith than they memorized. And and they literally spent their entire lives, like when we read us students of knowledge of today, even those students who are extremely devoted and dedicated, they spend their entire time studying. When they read the books of the people of the past, of the ulama of the past, they just feel at loss. How can somebody have so much knowledge, have so much recollection of everything? It's because they had so much barakah in their time, and they completely made their priority the ilm of the deen, right? And there's so many different stories about how they made the deen their priority. They would literally, there's some ulama who even they would forget about eating, right? And so they would tell their somebody in their family that, can you feed me so that I can also read and learn more about the deen while I am eating, so that my time is not wasted. And another alim is saying that the hardest time for me is the time that I have to eat in, because that I know that the time is being wasted. It's not obviously wasted because you need to eat in, but that's why he's saying it's the hardest time for me, because I know I have to eat, but at the same time, I know I can't do anything else during that time. Because I just have to eat. I can't read or do anything else during that time. So we see these great ulama who've done so much for the deen. There are ulama who literally have written 1,000 books, with no exaggeration. And these are not just books that are just, it's not like you wrote 2 pages that call it a book and said that I wrote 1,000 books. All these books are proper and beneficial books, adding things to the field of knowledge. And there are so many ulama who have written 100 books, 200 books, 500 books, and they've literally spent their entire lives learning this deen. And now we think that we can come learning 1 or 2 hadith and question their judgment and think that, oh, Imam Abu Hanifa, I think he was wrong about this. He was a great Imam, everything, he had so much knowledge, but I read in Sahih Bukhari, a translation of Sahih Bukhari, not even the actual Arabic, but I read a translation of Sahih Bukhari. And I think, based on this hadith, I think Imam Abu Hanifa was wrong about such and such issue. I think Imam Shafi was wrong about such and such issue. I think Imam Malik, I think Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahumullah, I think they were wrong about this issue because, the hadith is here. The hadith is very clear. We don't realize that Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad Hanbal, they were very well aware. In fact, they most likely narrated that hadith in their own hadith books, because they all have hadith books that they narrated. So they're most likely that they had already narrated the hadith that you were mentioning that they didn't know about in their books themselves. But there's a reason. There's so much, and this is something you can only appreciate when you go more into the field of hadith and even just the field of fiqh in general. There's so much to consider. You can never just judge based on one hadith. Rather, there's so many other hadith. It could be one hadith that's stating the complete opposite of the hadith that you're reading. So which one do you take? Right? And there's so many things that ulama do when there's 2 hadith which seemingly contradict themselves, but they understand the history of the life of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They understand the whole context. They understand the Quran as well. And based on their full holistic understanding of the deen, they made those judgments. Whereas us, coming 1400 years later in an era where knowledge is completely depleted and almost non-existent, we're coming and reading a translation of a hadith, and we think that we can just question their judgment. This is something which is a huge deception of shaitan, and we have to be very careful because it can be a means of destroying our deen. Right? There's a statement in Farsi. I don't really know the statement, but our teachers usually quote it. But they say that a half-baked doctor is a khatra for our Jan. It is a danger for your health, but that's not so dangerous. But a half-baked alim, meaning a person who's not truly an alim, but he just reads a few books here and there and thinks that he's an alim, he is a khatra deen. He is actually, or khatra akhirah. He is actually a danger for your akhirah, um he's actually a danger for your hereafter, and it could be a means of you being punished in the hereafter as well. So we have to be very careful, and everybody wants to become a mufti now. Somebody asks a question, this person says, well, I feel that this is right, I feel that that is right. And that is a very scary thing, because we have the huge ulama, the ulama that I just mentioned about how they literally spent their entire lives devoted to this. And they didn't have to learn Arabic, they knew Arabic from before, or they learned Arabic from a young age. So their entire lives literally spent for learning the deen. And yet you have Imam Malik, such a great alim. Yet he was asked about 36 questions, and he answered to almost all of them except 4, I believe. He said La adri. He said, I don't know. Even though he probably did have a general idea, maybe he had a slight doubt about the answer, so he said, I don't know, because he was very afraid of saying something about Allah which he was not qualified to say, or which he was not fully sure of. And that's actually one of the ayat we mentioned. What does shaitan try to make us do? One of the things he says, Allah says specifically, when he tricks us to say things about Allah that you not really know, right? So you don't truly have knowledge of it, but you just give a fatwa, and it's so surprising. Such great ulama, Imam Malik, who literally has an entire field of jurisprudence, he is telling a person who came from so far, asking him so many questions that I don't know. And another Imam, I believe it was Imam Muhammad, and somebody kept on asking him questions. So he said that he wants to make me a bridge between him and the fire, meaning if I answer him incorrectly, then I'm actually making a bridge between myself. I'm becoming a bridge between this person who's asking me the question and the fire, because this is about the deen of Allah. This is not a joke. So if you're answering questions without fully comprehending and being fully knowledgeable, then you're not harming anybody but yourself and the person that you're answering. So this is something that we have to be very careful of. In general, we have to bring respect back to authority again, and realize that we don't know, right? Realize that just because you can Google something doesn't mean you have knowledge of that subject. And this is a huge, and like, it's such a common statement. So it just pains my heart when I see this statement that people say that, oh, we have more knowledge than there was ever at our access than there ever has been in history. And as a common statement, you guys have probably heard it too. Maybe some of us have even said it. May Allah forgive us. But people that have all the knowledge. Now, we may have more books at our fingertips. For example, you can just go on the internet and go on Shamila, but you cannot say that we had more knowledge, because just having information at your fingertips is not knowledge whatsoever, as the situation of scholarship today can testify. Yes, there are great ulama today as well, but the overall picture you see is nothing compared to the picture of the past. You read the books of the past, you're just astonished by the knowledge. Sorry for a bit of a rant. This is something that I feel strongly about. So we have gone past time. So inshallah, we'll go over the rest of the points tomorrow. Inshallah, I know we spent multiple days on this, but I think there's something really important. We have to protect ourselves from the traps of shaitan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from shaitan, protect our the generations to come from shaitan as well. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from speaking without knowledge. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.